The video today is an update on some videos that I did not that long ago, where I showed you how to use a head tracking device with Envelop for Life so that you can produce spatial audio in Ableton. And we did that for the Arcgilab head tracker, and we also did that for the Subware head tracker. And for those of you who have seen those videos, and by the way, if you have not seen those videos, I strongly encourage you to watch them because I'm not going to go through every step today. But if you have seen those videos, you remember that we ran into a couple of issues. We could work around all of those issues and get it to work at some point, but it was less than perfect and it was not exactly the way it's supposed to work. Now, these issues were a result of a bug in the Max for Life device that we're using. And fortunately, a couple of days ago, the developer updated his device and got rid of those bugs. And it now works perfectly. So I felt it is now time to revisit these two head trackers and look into how to set them up. And this is what we're going to do today. Now, the video today is going to be a little bit shorter than normal. At least I'm guessing it's going to be shorter than normal because I'm not going to go through every single step. Once again, if you want to go through everything, I invite you to watch my previous videos. I'm going to post links in the description below. But I felt it deserves its own video. And the reason for that is because this is such a nice solution and it's such a pleasure to work with that I felt I probably need to kind of create a second video so that we have a good understanding on how to actually set that up. But first, hello everybody. In case you're new here, my name is Michael Wagner. I teach at the Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And on this channel, I talk about digital media, game design, and spatial audio. And if any of those topics interest you, I invite you to subscribe or join my Discord server. An invite link is in the description below. And with that being said, let's get started. Now, as always, I'm going to try to keep things as simple as humanly possible. So what I essentially have here, I have an empty or almost empty Ableton session. All I really have is it's really, I think it's an operator device. It's a grand piano that comes with Ableton. And that's really everything that I have right now. And that's really everything that we need, quite frankly. And what I want to do is I want to spatialize that sound with Envelop for Life. And if you have never worked with Envelop for Life, I did an entire series on that a couple of years ago. It still kind of works in exactly the same way. If this is something that interests you and you're new to that, please watch those videos. Here I'm just going to go through the basics. I'm not going to go very, very deep. Essentially, Envelop for Life is a set of Max for Life devices that I can use in order to spatialize audio. And it works by converting the stereo audio into ambisonics audio and then essentially converting the ambisonics either back to stereo for monitoring, or you can also export that into an ambisonics format and then essentially play it in a spatialized audio environment. The way this works is actually very, very simple. So essentially what you have on one hand, you have a panning device, and this panning device is in the wherever you put the Envelop for Life set of Max for Life devices. We are going to use this source panner here, and we are going to drop it onto our grand piano. And what's that going to do is it's going to take the audio that comes from the piano and it's going to convert that into an ambisonics file or into ambisonics format and channel that into Max for Life so that we essentially can then do all kinds of things within Max and in the end kind of bring it back into Ableton. Now, the reason it needs to do that is obviously because Ableton itself is only in stereo, so anything that is multi-channel essentially needs to bypass the routing within Ableton, and with Envelop for Life, essentially bypassing it through Max for Life. So this is essentially taking the piano, it's going to convert it into ambisonics according to our panning information here. And once again, this is three-dimensional, so it's not only left-right, it's also up-down and back-forth. And then essentially we need a secondary device that takes this ambisonics format or takes all the individual tracks that come in an ambisonics format and converts that back into stereo or exports it. And this is done through the master bus device. Now, the traditional master bus device in Envelop for Life does not come with head tracking, and that is why one developer essentially set out to create a master bus device that can actually work with Envelop for Life and that can work with head tracking. And this is the one that we are going to use. I'm going to post a link in the description below. You can simply download that as Envelop for Life. This is also completely free. And so we're not going to take the master bus device that comes with Envelop for Life directly. We're going to take this modified master bus that essentially has the head tracking information included, and we're going to drop that onto one of our audio tracks. It's not supposed to be, or it's actually not allowed to be the master bus, the master channel, but we can drop it on any audio channel, and that sort of becomes then the Envelop for Life master bus. And what this will do is it will essentially connect to the source panel through Max. So all the audio is going to be routed through Max from the source panel into our master bus device, and it's going to here be converted back into stereo. So if we play our piano again, we see essentially all the active ambisonics channels here. It is third order ambisonics, so there are 16 channels in total. And this is then essentially converting it back according to the binaural YouTube algorithm. There are a couple of algorithms that you can choose. I am essentially choosing here binaural. It doesn't really make any difference right now. Now, there are a couple of things that you can do here and which are really nice. Well, first of all, we can set specific outputs. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to simply use the monitor, the first two channels really as a monitoring bus. That essentially means it's just going to take that audio and going to pass it through so that if I play that, I essentially see here that it is passed through to the track, and I can monitor it that way. But I can also set the outputs directly. And one thing that the developer did with this revision of this master bus device, he also included the option to also select input routing, and that is actually pretty neat because that allows you to use Ableton sort of as a decoding device for anything that comes from the outside. So if you have, for example, an ambisonics microphone, you can route that into that modified master bus device, and it will convert that into stereo, and you can work with it that way. So this master bus device with the input routing has some additional options that are really, really nice. Now, in our case, we're just going to use the output, and we're not going to look at the head tracking right now. The one thing that I need to do is whenever you add the master bus device, you will actually hear that the volume, the gain essentially is much lower. So in order to make that actually hearable, let me just add a utility and just make the audio effects utility, and let's just add a little bit of gain here. Yeah, I think that's fine. So that we can hear it, and that's really everything that we're going to do. There's one thing, well, actually not completely. There's one more thing I'm going to do is, in order to make the effects a little bit more visible, or hearable really, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that stereo into mono, so that we essentially have a clear mono source that will help us identify the spatial locations of the sound when we are moving our head around. So in this particular case, it's not going to make a lot of difference currently, but essentially we will essentially hear the difference once we have head tracking enabled. And with that being said, let's go to our first head tracking device. The first device I'm going to use is the Arcgilab head tracker. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it to my computer. You probably heard the beep that the USB has connected, and then let's just put it on my headphones. The head tracker is essentially mounted to the headphones in exactly the same way as the Waves NX head tracker is connected. So we essentially need to take some rubber band and kind of connect it on here. And I also have this little Velcro thingy that to make sure that the cable is not moving anywhere. Oops, that's not completely well. Yeah, let's move that a little bit. It's not completely centered. That doesn't make a lot of difference. It doesn't need to be completely centered, but I'm a little OCD about those things. Let's just center it. Okay, much better. And the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that that our PC can essentially communicate with the head tracking device, and for that we need an OSC bridge, essentially a little software that takes the information that comes out of the head tracker and converts that into something that Ableton can understand, or that this Max for Life device can understand. I'm going to post links to all the software pieces that I'm going to use, or softwares, is this even a word? All the software pieces that I'm going to use in the description below, but essentially what we need here is the head tracking OSC bridge. And the head tracking OSC bridge essentially is that piece of information, or that piece of software that establishes the connection. It essentially takes the information that comes out of the head tracker and converts that into something that essentially that our Max for Life device can understand. So the first thing we need to do is we need to connect, and if I'm not completely mistaken, this is COM device 5. Yeah, okay, so I already see that sort of my head is giving information, roll, pitch, and yaw information. So let's just reset the head. Right, and I can see this little head here moving, so everything is working correctly. So the next thing I need to do is I need to configure it correctly. And the way this is configured is essentially that we need quaternions. So we're going to select quaternion information, and that needs to be in a different order. If you're not completely sure what I'm doing here, don't worry too much about it. Once again, there's a link in the description below that tells essentially what to put in here. But essentially the quaternion is a description of the spatial orientation, and what we really need to do is we need to make sure that we are passing on this coordinates of the quaternions in the correct order and with the correct direction. Now in our case, what we need to do is we need to say QX, so the X coordinate of the quaternion comes first, and then we have QC, so the C coordinate is the next one, and then we have, I have a cheat sheet here, minus QY, and the last one is the weight, QW. Let me just double check. Yips. And then we need to select the port to be 8000. And that should do it. So let's go to our master bus device, and what we now need to do is we need to select the Arcgilab head tracker, and now we see that we are already getting the information. Now when you're loading that into your Ableton for Live session, you should actually see the dummy head here. In my case, I don't see that, and I've worked with the developer to figure out what the problem is. It is a result of the scaling that I'm using here. I'm on Windows 11, and for these videos I scale everything by 200%, and that kind of makes everything very complicated, and Windows doesn't really understand it correctly. So the head is here, it's just kind of located here somewhere, so it's out of the picture. Anyway, so if you do that, you should see a head here, but it's doesn't make a whole lot of difference. We essentially see that the information is here. As I'm moving my head, yaw, pitch, and roll kind of moves accordingly. Let me just center that. And then essentially I have that information here. So if I'm now playing the sound, I should actually hear it. Well, once again, the sound, let's look at the location of that sound, is right in front of me. So if I'm playing the sound now, and if I'm not changing my head, I essentially have that sound right in front of me. Now when I'm moving my head to the right, and once again the audio that you are hearing is exactly the same audio that I'm hearing. So if I'm moving my head to the right, you should actually hear that as a panning to the left, because the position of the source is now to the left of my orientation of where I'm looking. So let's just see that. So I have that sound. If I'm moving to the right, essentially I have that sound here. If I do the other, it's here, right? And obviously I can also do the same thing by changing the azimuth. So essentially, if I'm moving the sound source to the left, I have it to the left. If I'm moving to the right, I have it to the right. If I move it to the back, so essentially I should actually hear it in the back now. So if I'm moving my head, I now have it in my right ear. So that essentially is working correctly. Let's just check that the up and down is also working correctly. And for that, we're going to switch from polar to XYZ coordinate. That makes it a little easier, because then we have the C coordinate that we can simply move up and down. And let's just move that up. So essentially now it should actually be upwards, right in front of me, and upwards. So if I'm moving my head in this direction, I should hear it on my right speaker, or my right ear. And if I'm essentially kind of moving, so let's do it like that. So I have it on in my right ear, and if I'm now moving down, up, down. So this is now working correctly, and we don't need to do any of the reverse things and everything. Everything just works. We put it in, and you get started. You kind of put the correct order of the quaternion coordinates into the tracker or into the bridge application, and you are essentially done. So with the Arcgilab tracker, everything is fine and dandy. So let's look at the second tracker that I'm like to use, which is the sub-aware tracker. Now for the sub-aware tracker, I'm going to use my DT990 Pro Biodynamic, and the reason for that is that these headphones allow me to take off the headbands, and that allows me to hide the head tracker inside of the headband. So let me just first of all put that in here, and then let's just close the headband again. Okay, and this one here, and then let's connect that head tracker. Okay. So let's just get that out of the way here. And similar to the Arcgilab head tracker, we need a bridge application that essentially takes the messages from the head tracker and converts that into OSC. In case of the sub-aware head tracker, this is called Bridgehead. So let's just open Bridgehead. And so this is the application here. Now, in case you don't see it connect immediately, one thing that you might want to do is you might want to disconnect the head tracker and connect it again. Sometimes it's a little finicky in terms of in what order you connect what. Now it worked, but there have been times where I actually needed to close Ableton in order to be able to connect it. But once it's connected, it's actually fairly stable. We just need to make sure that we have the settings correct. So in the connection settings, yeah, everything is essentially okay here. Essentially what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the cable. And if you remember, in the workaround that we used the last time is that we changed the chirality of the head tracker and then kind of also moved things around and reverse things. We don't really need to do that now. We just have the cable on the left. That's exactly the way it's supposed to be. In the bridge settings, we need to make sure that we have quaternion selected, quaternion composite. And that will essentially then communicate the information to the Max for Live device. Now, the nice thing, once again, about Bridgehead application is that it stays open. So in contrast to the other application that we had, which needs to be essentially constantly running, Bridgehead can actually minimize to the task tray, and it will continue to track. Now, once we have that done, essentially we go back to the master device, and we just select the Bridgehead tracker, and we now see that we have the Bridgehead tracker, and said let's center that again, and it's now once again tracking my head information. And let's just make sure that everything works correctly. So once again, the sound is directly in front of us. Probably need a little bit more gain. Okay, so if I'm now moving the let's switch back to polar. So if we move it to the left, move it to the right, move it back, it's now back there. And once again, it's exactly the same thing. Essentially, when I move my head to the right, it's you hear it as a panning to the left. And let's double check if the up and down, if the third dimension is working correctly. So currently it's slightly below. So if we move it up, down, up, down. And everything is working correctly. How cool is that? Now, these are both very, very usable options for head tracking. They're both very good. I'm honestly not completely sure which one I prefer. Now, the sub-aware head tracker, and I think I mentioned that, has this very nice feature that essentially it completely integrates into the headphone. And this makes it very stealthy. You still have that cable hanging around. Now, this is a very stiff cable. You would probably have a much more flexible cable, and you could probably connect it to the headphone cable so that it wouldn't kind of really be that much of a big deal, But you know, kind of that's the only thing. Other than that, it's completely stealthy. Arcgilab's head tracker is a do-it-yourself head tracker. You can simply do it yourself. Once again, if you want to know more about how these head trackers work, I invite you to watch my previous videos. And if you want to know more about Envelop for Life, I invite you to watch the tutorial series that I did a couple of years ago. Once again, nothing much has changed in Envelop for Life. It still works exactly the same. Very, very well done. Very nice to work with, and a very good way to get started with spatial audio if your DAW of choice is Ableton. And this is really everything I wanted to say today. Thank you so much for watching my videos. I hope you got value out of it. And if you did, please don't forget to press the like button. And with that being said, see you at the next video.